it can't be overstated how big that win was for Arne Slot, because if they go on to the San Siro and lost with Mo Salah not in the squad, then that would have been used as a massive stick to beat him with.
The thing is, when you've got someone who's been so good for so long, when your powers start to wane and actually it becomes that you're just one of the others, mentally you can't accept that. And when a genius becomes just the norm, they find it very, very hard to deal with that.
And actually, how you handle those players probably determines whether or not you're going to be a success or a failure at these super clubs.
The big thing that surprised me about all this is how thin-skinned Mo Salah is. And you would have thought that someone of his standing in the game, someone who scored all the goals that he has, someone who's won all there is to win, certainly at club level, he would be able to rise above that. He doesn't seem to, because if he is on the bench, sat with a glare on his face, then that is all everyone's going to focus on. It's going to be a circus. So I would be amazed if he's back in the squad. The only way that this gets resolved is if Mo Salah comes out and publicly apologises to his manager. He's not going to do that because it wasn't an off-the-cuff interview. He planned this. He thought about what he was going to say. It was premeditated.
But these egos don't apologise because they don't feel they should.
Hello, gentlemen. Hope we are well. Scotty, you okay?
I'm very good, thank you, mate. A little tired, and not just because I hosted a lovely, lovely event at Mansion House last night that involved West Ham and their foundation, but actually still recovering from going out with Crookie on Monday.
Oh, right. Okay. See, okay. I'm pleased you put that in because I thought you were going to say it was because I was out with Ray Winston last night, lads.
Don't like to talk about it, mate. Don't like to talk about it.
We got a big compliment, by the way, this week, Scott. We were told that Tuesday's podcast by one of the comments in the Spotify group was very good, despite the fact that Scott Minto wasn't on it, which I thought was, a feather in all of our caps, really.
You've got my text then. That's good.
Dallas Cowboy, how are you?
I'm good. Like Scott, I'm still recovering from our festivities on Monday, but what a brilliant day down at Fontwell Park Racing. They looked after us. We got to present a prize to one of the winning owners. We all had Santa hats and Santa jumpers. And yeah, I don't really remember the night ending, but that's a good sign, I think.
Well, that is
it didn't
a good
end
sign.
for him. It didn't.
It never ends. His life is just one big Christmas do. And he's been deployed to Dallas in Texas for the World Cup. And he's very excited about it. And then, of course, England very quickly get drawn in Dallas. It's just Crookie's world and we're all living in it, right? Okay, even England, organising their schedule around Alex Crook, which is good. But it does mean after ITV picked up that first game that the likelihood is that I will be there with you. Touch wood. That means that I will be alongside you in Dallas. We can both be Dallas Cowboys together. We can dress up. We can do all sorts of line dancing and loads of great things, Crook.
Well, my daughter is desperate for me to go and have a sort of training session with the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. So maybe you can join in with that.
No. Nobody needs to see you doing that, especially not in a crop top and a pair of high shorts. Right, okay. Let's talk about what happened midweek in the Champions League. Manchester City, are they about to launch a title charge? They showed some real quality in Madrid, Scott Minto.
Yes, they did. And look, it's a Real Madrid side that's under pressure at the moment, for sure. But to come back from 1-0 down in the Bernabeu, you have to have some, courage, as well as technique. And yeah, well done to them. I mean, look, I'll go back to Arsenal, what happened at Villa Park. Well, they lost at Villa Park as well, Manchester City. So I don't see a big thing in that for Arsenal. What I do see is they're coming up behind you, Arsenal. Be very, very careful because honestly, I didn't go for City at the start of the season because I still feel there's a vulnerability there. But they're looking capable now of possibly being where they were a couple of seasons ago, where they can win 6, 7, 8 on the spin. If they do, then Arsenal do need to watch out.
And that's second half of the season stuff for Pep Guardiola, isn't it? I was in Germany this morning, actually. I woke up in Germany this morning before flying back to do the podcast, just to be with you two. And I watched the Leverkusen and Newcastle United. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think the narrative this morning is quite sort of like downbeat about the fact that they threw away 3 points again. They should have had 3. They only got 1. But actually, I think if you look at it in the cold light of day, it's a good away point, actually, for Newcastle. They would have taken that before the game. they fought back from 1-0 down after what was a poor start to the game. They started all right, actually, first 5 minutes, but then the game sort of got away from them. They weren't great, didn't create enough. Then Leverkusen scored a spawny goal from a set piece. It's been a bugbear of Eddie Howe's that they concede far too many set piece goals. It's also been a bugbear that once they get ahead in a game, and they did brilliantly to turn it round, that they keep throwing it away with late goals. They don't hold on to the ball. They cause themselves pressure. It's a long time to, and I said this during the commentary, 75 minutes now. It's a long time to sit deep and try and defend the lead. It's not going to happen. They didn't. They ended up drawing 2-2, and they had chances to win the game prior to the equaliser from Grimaldo. I thought overall Newcastle looked like a very good team, but they've got to make sure that in those pressurised moments, they start to retain the ball a little bit better. They remind me a little bit like England a couple of years ago when they get themselves into a good position, but just can't hold on to it because they're constantly giving the ball away, almost a little bit too rushed when they've gone ahead. But I think overall, they're in a good position in the Champions League. Arsenal, they won 3-0 out in Brugge. And Crook, you were doing this one?
Yeah, Noni Madueke, the star of the show. Brilliant first goal. One of the best goals I've seen all season to get them off and running. Easy header for his second. Martinelli pops up with a beauty soon after to become the first Arsenal player ever to score in 5 successive Champions League games. 3-0 probably flattered them because Club Brugge had chances. David Raya made a particularly good save at 1-0, as he's done on a few occasions this season. I think he's been absolutely terrific. I was really impressed with Hincapié, pretty much the only senior centre-back that Arsenal had available, and he produced a real leader's performance at the back. And I think for Arsenal, with 8 players out injured, 5 changes that Mikel Arteta made, Saka left on the bench for most of the game, same for Eberechi Eze, Mikel Arteta will be absolutely delighted. And again, it just shows their strength in depth. And they've qualified now, barring a freak goal difference swing. They're going to be in the top 8. Job done with 2 matches to spare.
You also had a look at Chelsea away in Bergamo. Now 4 games without a win since their big victory over Barcelona in the Champions League.
Yeah, the opposite story, really, because Enzo Maresca made changes. I thought it was a really strange defensive lineup when I got the team sheet. Gusto left on the bench. Fofana benched until half-time, and I think probably only came on because of a yellow card. And they looked defensively vulnerable. Both goals were poor from Chelsea's perspective. Didn't create bags of opportunities. João Pedro probably should have scored late on to get a point, but they've given themselves a tough arse now because they'll beat Paphos at home in their next game. Then they go to Napoli, who aren't having a great season in the Champions League. However, Chelsea's away record is poor. They've dropped points, lost at Bayern, lost at Atalanta, drawn away from home at Karabag. So I think in terms of the top 8, it's looking a little bit dicey. And I just think he tinkers too much, Enzo Maresca. He makes too many changes week in, week out.
Yeah, might get to that a little bit later on. Liverpool got a much-needed victory on the road away in Milan. They beat Inter by 1-0. And bearing in mind the circumstances that surround it, was really important for Arne Slot, wasn't it, Scott?
Yeah, it was absolutely massive. And look, I mean, in terms of the team that he picked, and I've said this to you too in the studio a couple of weeks ago, where Alan Kirbishley told me a story about what Sir Bobby Robson said about a manager who had lost 6, 7, 8 on the spin. What would you do? I'd play, and he before Curbs could even answer, he said, I'd play 11 defenders. And the point being, you make yourself just very, very difficult to beat. And with the team that he picked, with that kind of 4-diamond-2, I think that's exactly what it was. You know, the 4 central midfielders, they all worked really hard, both with and without the ball. And look, I worked on the Inter Como game at the weekends beforehand, and Inter were very good both with and without the ball. So for Liverpool to go there in the circumstances that they're playing at the moment, with the pressure they're all under, and especially Arne Slot, to go to the San Siro and to get the win, that's a fantastic win. And I kind of expect them to go into the top 8 now.
Okay, we'll focus more on Liverpool in just a second because they've got a big game this weekend, and we'll try and pick through some of the stories that have been coming out of the Kirby training complex and the selfies that are being taken and the walks in the park that some protagonists have been having this week. It was not a walk in the park for Tottenham, despite the fact that they won 3-0 at home on Tuesday night. I was there for that one as well. And it was a really odd game. Slavia Prague went man for man all over the pitch. There was loads of spaces, but Tottenham, despite having 15 shots on goal, needed an own goal and 2 penalties to get over the line. It was chaotic in the extreme, and they actually gave up a lot of chances. And actually, if you review the match, you'll see that if a better team had been their opponents, they would have converted some of those chances and Tottenham would have found themselves in a little bit of trouble. That said, 3 points, absolutely vital for Thomas Frank, bearing in mind that home has been very difficult for them over the course of the last few years, especially in 2025. So to put back-to-back home wins on the board in front of those Tottenham fans, I think the Tottenham fans are just very, very grateful about that. That's it for Europe. Let's get into the weekend's Premier League action then, and the final game for Mo Salah at Anfield. Well, is it? I'm not even sure he's going to play. A little bit tongue-in-cheek from us there. I only said that because he said it or alluded to it in the mix zone when he stopped at the weekend. He was left out in midweek, though, and didn't go to San Siro when Liverpool played Inter Milan. They picked up a huge win in his absence. So you probably wouldn't change a winning formula anyway. But Crook, what do you understand about his future? Because obviously Liverpool have got to make a stand. But are the Saudis interested in taking him still?
Oh, the Saudis are definitely interested. I don't think that interest ever went away. I think it's their dream signing, arguably the greatest ever Muslim player to go and play his trade over in the Saudi Pro League. And I think he basically has got his pick of clubs. Al Hilal seem very keen, but they're not alone. This was a deal that I expected to really ramp up at the end of this season, despite Salah signing a 2-year contract. I think part of the reason Liverpool offered that was to protect his future transfer value, knowing that this move was always likely at some point, but it may well accelerate now in the January window, because to me, I've debated it a lot over the last week or so, it still feels like a premeditated attack from Mo Salah to try and force his way out of the football club. I think it bears hallmarks of Cristiano Ronaldo and that explosive interview that he gave with Piers Morgan at a time when he knew his days at Manchester United were numbered. And I think Liverpool and the hierarchy had to come out and back Arne Slot as they did by leaving him at home in midweek. They've won the game, so there's no reason to change the starting 11. He's not going to start against Brighton on Saturday. And then you debate the pros and cons of having him in the squad at all, because if he is on the bench, sat with a glare on his face, then that is all everyone's going to focus on. It's going to be a circus. So I would be amazed if he's back in the squad, if he's even at the stadium on Saturday. I just don't see it. I agree with what Danny Murphy said on talkSPORT on Wednesday. The only way that this gets resolved is if Mo Salah comes out and publicly apologises to his manager. He's not going to do that because it wasn't an off-the-cuff interview. He planned this. He thought about what he was going to say. It was premeditated.
He's not going to do that because he's continued the trend of stoking the fires all week by posting selfies alone in the gym at the Liverpool training complex. So, look, he's not in no mood to back down. It certainly looks that way. As in a similar situation, Cristiano Ronaldo was in no mood to back down after that interview with Piers Morgan. In which case, I suppose that cancelling that plane ticket for his mum and not inviting her to the Brighton game is probably a good idea. But, Scott, I thought it was really interesting that you had former professionals like Dejan Lovren, current professionals that have left Liverpool, like Jordan Henderson, giving reactions to that Mo Salah picture when he's sitting on his own inside the training complex in Kirkby in the gym, looking lonely and forlorn and having no one around him. And there was a little bit of a swell of support by people who had already left Liverpool. And I just wonder whether or not, and you'll know more than we will, as a former professional, whether or not there is more to this story than meets the eye. Because everybody, pretty much 80% of people, have come out on the side of the club here. Liverpool have rallied around. The machine has gone into overdrive. Everybody has said this is all down to Mo Salah. But can that be entirely true?
Yeah, no, I think it can. I mean, I don't necessarily think there is anything that we don't know or beneath the scenes. I personally think, from what I've experienced in the dressing room with some top class players, and most of them have egos. Some can put that to one side and still be very much a team player. Some can blow up every now and again, and some you just have to, they're treated completely differently. The thing is, when you've got someone who's been so good for so long, and I don't think he said it in the right way, and I'm not trying to defend Mo Salah here because he is in the wrong. But when you've been that superstar, and of course other Liverpool players have helped win the major trophies that he's won in that time, but he's been the number one superstar. When you've been that superstar, when your powers start to wane, and actually it becomes that you're just one of the others, mentally you can't accept that. You know, Cristiano Ronaldo was another one where he can't accept that. And yes, he sounded very calm post the game, in the third game of a week. And that to me tells me that Arne Slot is just not having it at all. And by the way that Clarence Seedorf tried to sort of pin him down, and you could see just, you know, if looks could actually tell us exactly how he was feeling with Arne Slot. He didn't want to be there. He wanted to say lots of things. He was holding himself back for sure. There's no way he's going to Salah. There's no way that Salah's going to him. There's no point in him being on the bench, as Crookie says, not just being up, looking upset, but, you know, all the cameras are going to be on him all the time. So it is going to be an absolute circus. But I do feel sorry for Salah in the way, because from what I hear, he is a really good guy, but he's not accepting the situation that he's not that superstar anymore. And when a genius becomes just the norm, they find it very, very hard to deal with that.
But this is half the problem, right? Isn't it? Is that, and I think Xabi Alonso is encountering this issue at Real Madrid, and that is that you've got now these superstar players that almost transcend the club and the sport that they're playing because of the way that social media works, because of the way that brand association works. You know, they're elevated to such a level that they're almost brands in their own right. You look at Mbappe, you look at Vinicius Junior, you look at Mo Salah. Mo Salah in parts of the world is just like a king. He's just like, honestly, like so elevated in terms of the way he is revered, that the sort of the football stuff is just part of what they do. It's just part of the brand. And the idea that you've got to try and be a manager controlling those huge egos comes with a lot of pitfalls and problems, Crook. And actually how you handle those players probably determines whether or not you're going to be a success or a failure at these super clubs.
Yeah, and obviously last season it wasn't such a big issue because they were winning games. It was quite easy to pick the team. Although he did have to navigate Arne Slot, the contract disputes that were going on in the background. Obviously, we knew Trent was going to leave. Salah cast doubt on his future at one stage. The last time he stopped in a mix zone outside a game at Southampton, and you had a similar issue with Van Dijk, although he kept his situation quite private. I think the big thing that surprised me about all this is how thin-skinned Mo Salah is. You look at his sort of war of words with Jamie Carragher, who he referenced directly when he spoke to reporters outside Ellen Road. From what I'm told, he is very stung by any form of criticism in the media, particularly from those ex-players. And you would have thought that someone of his standing in the game, someone who scored all the goals that he has, someone who's won all there is to win, certainly at club level, he would be able to rise above that. He doesn't seem to. And I'm told actually he's got it in his head that maybe the club have gone to Jamie Carragher and encouraged him to publicly criticise Mo Salah, which I think is well wide of the mark. But this is what somebody close to Salah seems to put in his head.
Yeah, but this is what happens with big egos, isn't it, Scott? You know, it's like, I don't know, Alex Crook breaks 20 transfer stories, but if Ben Jacobs gets one ahead of him, he goes into absolute meltdown.
We're a team, me and Ben. That's a bad comparison.
I'm glad you mentioned Crookie, because I was going to use an example on him, the superstar that he is right now.
Because he does, he gets so tetchy when things don't go his way. That's what happens. If you're a superstar, this is what happens. You know, if someone criticizes you, it stings because, you know, actually they do it for adulation as well. You know, they love the adulation. They love the fact that they are entertaining people, that they're making massive statements with their actions, and you know they love the applause. It's a bit like theatre, and as soon as that isn't coming their way and it's a very different response, then of course it's going to hurt, because it's part of your art is to entertain and to be loved.
Sam, you and I will never understand, but Crookie obviously can, being the genius that he is. But when you've been that superstar, and again, I'm trying to think back of certain players, and I don't want to mention names, but that I've played with, and they've just been sensational. They've just been, you look at the manager. Are you not going to tell him to shut up here? No, we're not. I'm not, because he can win us the game in the way that he had. When you've had that mentality, going out to the Coliseum in front of all the fans and turning around a 2-0 defeat into a 3-2 win, and it's kind of almost been on you. When you've been that good, to then realise it, or to try and accept that you're not quite that good anymore, or actually for the good of the club. And that's the ultimate question here, Sam. We're all talking about it for as long as we want, but there's only one question we and the club need to ask. What's best for Liverpool Football Club? And if he's going to carry on like this and keep on posting stuff, because I'm with Danny, and I had a bit of a thing with Crookie on Sunday on air as well. And I said exactly what Danny said. Look, if he apologises, I'd accept it. It wouldn't be a problem. But these egos don't apologise because they don't feel they should. And the only thing I'd say in defence of him is that what he has earned the right is not necessarily to stay in the team longer, but I found it strange for him to say, I used to get on really well with Arne Slot, now he doesn't talk to me. And that's where the genius needs to be talked to, whether he likes it or not. Have honesty to him. Look, we're in this situation. We need this type of player. We think you're great. We still love you to death. But, Crookie will get that in a few years' time. Don't worry. But, I'm going to go down this route for the next game or two. And I found that strange that Arne Slot hasn't done that.
But, Scott, this is why I asked you, there has to be a little bit more to it, because when Arne Slot stands in front of the media on Tuesday or Monday, whenever it was ahead of the Inter Milan game, and they say, your relationship has broken down with Mo Salah. How did that happen? And he goes, well, I don't know anything about that. I don't know where that's come from. So if the relationship has broken down and one party doesn't know about it, that is slightly odd, isn't it, really? He doesn't talk to me anymore. Someone's either embellishing or exaggerating, aren't they, here? And I think that is the problem. That's why I think there's probably a little bit more to it. I'm not necessarily saying that there's something sinister here, but there's definitely a breakdown in communication some way, somehow, whether that's on purpose because Liverpool want to move him on, or it's because Salah wants to agitate for a move to Saudi. We're not sure. It's a big negotiation being played out in front of everybody. Look, we've got to move on because we've been talking Salah for far too long, really. And Liverpool have got a match to win against Brighton at home this week, and that's not going to be easy. They played Ekitike, Isaac and Jones as the front three in midweek. I just wonder whether or not they've sort of stumbled on something, or they've got an idea in their head, or Arne Slot's got an idea in his head. What is his best front three now? We better do this pretty quickly. Go for it, Crook.
I don't think it was just about the front three, actually. I think it was more about the sort of midfield diamond, making them a little bit more compact, a little bit more in control of games, which was a hallmark of last season. I thought that gave Gomez in particular and Robertson the opportunity to bomb on. So they just looked a lot more resolute, and I think it was a massive win. It can't be overstated how big that win was for Arne Slot, because if they go on to the San Siro and lost with Mo Salah not in the squad, then that would have been used as a massive stick to beat him with. I think the fact they've ground out a 1-0 win suggests the rest of the players are still very much with the manager. So it should be a springboard to go on and have a much better season in the Premier League. But we thought that before, and every time you think they've turned a corner, they get a slap in the face. I think he should pick the same 11 against Brighton, assuming everybody's fit, no question about that. And it might be a good opponent, because you know that Brighton are going to come and have a go. And the teams that Liverpool have struggled against, particularly at home, are those who've sat in a low block. They've tried to frustrate them and hit on the counter. It's not really the way that Brighton do it. And they're not brilliant this season, Brighton. They're so inconsistent. You don't know what you're going to get from one half to the other, let alone one match to the other when it comes to the Seagulls.
Yeah, they're still within striking distance of the European places, which is quite amazing. I think even they are a little bit surprised. Look, this is there for the taking. They believe that they can get into the top six this season, because the division is very competitive, but it's also very inconsistent. Look, it's hard to predict what team we're going to get from Brighton, what sort of shape they're going to turn up in. The West Ham game at home looked like a gimme, or as Crook would say, a give me. But they were lucky to escape with a draw. Can they get something given the Liverpool malaise, Scott, here?
Not if they play like they did against West Ham. I was at that game for talkSPORT, and they were really, really poor. And it wasn't until the last sort of 10 minutes that, they just try to get the ball forward, and they put West Ham under pressure. And we know, Crookie, there was 3 parts to that particular goal that was allowed in the end. No, I think if Liverpool are at it, the only thing I'd say about Liverpool, and I agree with Crookie, go as close to the 11 as you can. Wonder whether you might bring in Verts for Isak, who I thought Isak still wasn't very, very good at all. So you might put, almost like, well, it's pantomime season, isn't it? It's Christmas. So go the Christmas tree formation with Wirtz and McAllister just behind Ekitike. But honestly, mate, Brighton were really poor. I was really surprised. I said to you at the start of the season that Brighton have a chance of finishing in the fifth or it's very open, that fifth or sixth position. I think that's proven to be the case, but they need to be a lot better than they were against West Ham.
Okay, let's move on because we've got lots of other games to look at. Let's start with Arsenal Wolverhampton Wanderers, which is live on talkSPORT. It's an 8 o'clock kickoff on Saturday night. Yes, we've got a Saturday night instalment. In fact, the next 2 weeks we've got Saturday night Arsenal. Saturday night live with Arsenal. Arsenal against Wolves this week. Everton against Arsenal next week. I'll be at both of those. The league leaders handed the biggest gift to get back on a winning run at home to one of the worst sides in the Premier League's most recent history, I think. This is a real opportunity, isn't it, to get back on track for Arsenal, because Wolves, let's be completely honest, defensively against Manchester United on Monday night were absolute guff, Crook.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're saying we need to move on because we spent a lot of time on certain topics. I don't think we need to dwell on this game for too long, to be honest, because Arsenal will win. It's a question of how many they fancy winning by. I hope you got your abacus at the ready, because Wolverhampton Wanderers managed to achieve a feat in the second half on Monday night that few teams have in the last few years and made Manchester United look like world beaters. I think they're going to be the worst team in Premier League history. I don't know where the next point is coming from, let alone their next victory. I don't think Rob Edwards will be lavish with any money to spend in January because they're going to be down already by then. This is a great game for Arsenal. He could leave Saka, Eze, whoever he wants on the bench again, and they're going to win by 3 or 4.
It's a good opportunity to rest, and they haven't got another game until the next Saturday as well. So it's a chance just to replenish that squad a little bit and just make sure that everybody gets a bit of an R&R over the next week or so. I know why he doesn't want to talk about this game too much is because both of you can't remember what happened at the end of it on Monday night because of the state that you were both in. So I can understand why you want to move on quickly. I get it. A few Arsenal fans, though, asking a little bit of Bukayo Saka, asking a little bit more from him. Clearly, he's an unbelievable player and a brilliant talent, but he hasn't had his best start to the season. The assist that he got against Chelsea was his first in a year, and he has been injury interrupted, but he hasn't been as productive as maybe he was 12 months ago, Scott.
No, and by the way, we resent that remark, what you said.
I did have to check the scorers the next morning.
Yeah, and then when I asked you about it on the podcast, you only named 3 of them and somebody else left out Mason Mount.
Yeah, but in a way, isn't that a good thing that Arsenal are where they are at the moment, top of the Premier League, top of the Champions League, and yet arguably their best player has still got better form to come through. What I think about Noni Madueke. I think he's a fantastic talent. I was really disappointed to see Chelsea sell him. I know it's decent money, but he's a very, very, very good player, especially if you get the best out of him. And he. The biggest compliment I can give him is now Arsenal don't miss Saka if he's fit, if he's playing well. Of course, you'd still have Saka as in your first 11, but at this moment, in this current form, what Crookie was saying about what he did midweek, I'd stick Madueke. By the way, for this game, I don't know. I think Max Dowman's injured, isn't he? I don't know what the other
he's out for 2 months.
What the other youth team players are like at Arsenal, but they might as well play their under-18 side of this.
We've been very disparaging here, aren't we, of a Premier League club?
Well, you've just said you think they're going to be the worst points-wise in Premier League history, so that pretty much says everything.
I was going to say you started it.
Of course, it is.
And let's be honest, we're not being disrespectful. They have been pretty poor. Okay, maybe Scott was being a little bit tongue-in-cheek with the under-18s, but it's actually quite frightening how bad they've been. And do you know what? I'm totally behind those Wolverhampton Wanderers supporters who didn't come in until 15 minutes on Monday night, because we've been saying this for ages. The way that they have run the club, Fosun, over the course of the last number of years is actually a dereliction of duty, really. And it's almost a little bit like, it actually sums up what happened with the Chinese investment in football. They had that major sort of rush where they got loads of superstars over to China. They came in and took over a number of clubs in England, but nothing really has worked, has it? The Super League, the Chinese Super League, has never been elevated to the status to which it wanted to. And the investment in football entities in this country has basically ended in tears in pretty much every single case. And I think this Fosun one will too. The quicker that they can shift it on, the better.
Yeah.
Wolves need fresh blood in there, managing the club top to bottom. And Rob Edwards needs to be given a chance to be able to bring this team back because they're already relegated. I mean, you look at them, you just think, that I don't actually even know what they're trying to do now because I just think the quality is so poor that there's such a lack of Premier League experience in there. There's just a lot of young players with some potential. Talking of which, Chelsea against Everton on the weekend is going to be a big game, Saturday. And less than a month ago, in fact, only a couple of weeks ago, Chelsea had hammered Barcelona. They got a creditable draw against Arsenal with 10 men, but they haven't won a game since. Although I think Robert Sanchez has won PFA Player of the Month for November. So
they didn't see him on the second goal in midweek then.
That second goal in midweek had me pulling my hair out, by the way, because I think he went down about a day after Ketelara had hit it. Anyway, Scott, how are they going to get on against Everton? Because it is a bit sort of frustrating. What's happened, do you think, to this team in that period since they started to be talked about again as possible title challengers?
Yeah, we didn't hear me saying that, Sam.
No, but other people did because they were that close. Yeah. You know, if they'd beaten Arsenal and there were chances to do that in that game, then things could have looked different and you wouldn't have been able to stop the talk. But now you're not going to start it again, are you? We are right about it. They are inconsistent. They're not going to mount a title challenge because the lack of experience and the lack of nous. But you know, I think everybody's seeing that now.
Yeah, and you know, so it's nice that we've been consistent from the start, even if they'd have beaten.
But we watch them all the time, so we see it.
Yeah, but there's other people who watch it and still, at least try and chuck it out there in the narrative they've spent the money. And I understand the narrative they've spent the money, but just look at the squad. You know, it's a bit of sort of Groundhog Day in what I'm saying. They're capable of beating anyone on their day. Look at PSG, look at Barcelona, you know, Liverpool a little bit earlier in the season, Arsenal down to 10 men and still got a draw. And as you say, had chances. And yet what do? They go to Leeds. The Bournemouth performance is really poor. Enzo Maresca has to take some of the blame. Look, you know, some of the team selections and the substitutions for sure are almost baffling. But actually, I think he's just planning for the season, and he's almost not forgetting about the here and now.
He's over planning, isn't he?
Well, yeah, but I mean, again, what I would say here is let's judge him at the end of the season. So I'm looking at the here and now, and I'm saying, well, why are you putting him right back when actually your right back's here? Why are you bringing the right back on? Why are you? Well, that's clearly planned for Cole Palmer to play 60 minutes and then not travel. He's looking so far in terms of the sports science and what we're going to do. Don't forget, there's still what happened in the summer as well. They didn't have a break. I don't think this little mini dip is anything to do with that. I think the Arsenal and the Barcelona games just took a lot out of them physically and emotionally, and they're not ready yet to be able to deal with that. But I do think that he's looking too far into the medium and far term, long term, rather than thinking, we need to win this game. You know, that was a big blow to lose to Atalanta. It really was. But the players, again, have to take responsibility. Why are Badiashile and Cucurella dropping off in the way they are? Sanchez, you've got to save that. It's as simple as that. So, look, everyone has to take collective responsibility, but you've got a young manager with young players, and looks like they're not going to be given senior pros. So we have to wait for them to grow organically.
But by the time they grow organically, Chelsea would have sold them. That's because that's what happened with Madueke, for example. You know, I'm looking around the Premier League, and this is why PSR gets on my nerves. Tino Livramento came through at Chelsea. Lewis Hall came through at Chelsea. You've got Madueke, who's recently been on the Chelsea books. Mark Gay is one of the best central defenders in the country. He was at Chelsea as well. It just seems like they've just wasted a hell of a lot of talent that they had in the building that they've allowed to escape over time. And I know it's frustrating. It's more frustrating for Chelsea supporters than it is for everybody else in the league. But you do think to yourself, hold on a second. If they had kept all of those players with that great talent, we might be in a different situation now. Do you know? I mean, Gay being in the backbone of that team now, I mean, that's experience and nous and a leader that you probably require at this stage of the season. I think you're right about the tinkering. Crook's right about the tinkering. There's too much tinkering. We've said it a number of times, making changes for change's sake. It's almost a little bit like he's got like an algorithm that says you can't do this and you can't do that. So, okay. And they're working too much to that. Look, maybe it's because the players are vulnerable to injury, but the team's vulnerable to dropping points, and it has dropped too many points. As for Everton, David Moyes has them up into the European places in the Premier League table. He has got them into Europe before. Will he do it again? It seems that the battle for a Champions League place is wide open, Crook.
Yeah, listen, I think it's going to be tough for Everton to sustain it all season long. I don't think the squad is deep enough, but you can't not be impressed with what he's doing there. And there are some really good individual performances. I think Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall has had a fabulous season, and we all mocked him when he said he wasn't going to play for Ireland because he still thinks he can get in the England squad. I don't think that's going to happen because there's so many players of a similar profile, but he's playing. Well, I think everybody sort of took a sideways look and said, well, that's not going to happen, Kiernan, is it? But he's playing well enough to be in contention, that's for sure. As I say, I don't think he'll make the plane, but he's been brilliant. Jack Grealish obviously has found a new lease of life there. Even Tierno Barry has now scored a Premier League goal, and you can see what that meant for him and for his teammates. Defensively, they're always going to be resolute because that's what you get from David Moyes. They've got a top-class goalkeeper in Jordan Pickford. I think they've got a good chance at Stamford Bridge of at least coming away with a point.
I think what we need to understand, especially with new players like Tierno Barry, is just how hard the Premier League is. If you are playing in the Premier League, you are the best of the best of the best. It is, the top 0.1% of footballers in the world play in the Premier League. You have to be at your absolute extreme maximum to be able to compete in this division. So, it does take a little bit of time for people to settle occasionally. Some people find it much easier because of their physical output and their style of play. And some people take a bit of time. And look, he was well scouted, and the people that were watching him and brought him to Everton were pretty sure that he would make an impact in the end. Good luck to him because he puts himself about a bit. He has got that goal now, and I hope in the end it ends up working out for him. Good for David Moyes as well. By the way, I don't know, do you read books, Scott? Do you read books? Do you do novels or anything like that?
I don't have time for that, mate. Sorry.
You're so busy. I know, Crook, when was the last time you read a book that wasn't to do with sport or like a biography? Because you read those, don't you, when you go on holiday?
Yeah, well, I'm on Martin Keown's at the moment. I'm on chapter 3. I've been reading it.
Have you read a story? When was the last time you read a story?
You've been reading that for 3 months, haven't you?
Yeah, you've really got to get through that first bit.
Yeah, fiction is not really for me. I live in the real world, not in a fantasy land.
Well, I'm reading the latest Jack Reacher book, and Lee Child and Andrew Child, who write those books, always drop in. The characters there's always characters that are named after famous football figures. And there are 2 blokes that are working in this sort of grimy underworld organization in the latest book. One of them is called Steve McLaren and the other one's called David Moyes. I thought that was quite funny. That's it for Saturday's action. Let's get into Sunday now, and a huge game in the Northeast. It is the Wear Tyne derby. Well, it's the Wear Tyne derby because it's happening on Wear side. If it was in Newcastle, it would be the Tyne-Wear derby. But Sunderland take on Newcastle. It's the first derby in the Premier League in 9 years. I was at the last one, which was in the FA Cup, and it was a very one-sided affair. I don't think this will be, Scott.
No. To say I can't call this, if you pin me down, I'd actually fancy Sunderland. And because, 1, the season they've had, 2, the fact that they're playing at home, and 3, Newcastle have had a tough away game midweek, and Sunderland have been able to plan. So, look, I think Sunderland have been a team of the season. I really do. I think they've been absolutely sensational. Brilliant recruitment, brilliant management. I was at the Stamford Bridge earlier in the season where I was with you, Cookie, wasn't I? I wouldn't say necessarily deserved to win. I thought, well, certainly Chelsea didn't deserve to lose, but for a small team going to a big team, playing away from home, the way they were set up, they were absolutely superb. And I think the atmosphere here is going to be unbelievable. And Sunderland fans genuinely, they were taught a lesson, weren't they, that game in the FA Cup against Newcastle. This is at worst going to be 50-50.
But it's
Yeah.
amazing how it changed so quickly, isn't it? Because if you sort of look at it on paper, a Champions League team backed by a huge Saudi entity should be wiping the floor with a team that has been newly promoted and changed half of their side. But it doesn't even scratch the surface in telling the full story, does it, Crook?
No, it doesn't. And I was quite sweet on Sunderland at the start of the season. I didn't expect them to take to the Premier League as smoothly as they have, and I still think there's going to be bumps in the road, particularly when they lose seemingly half their squad to the African Cup of Nations. But Regis Lebris is proved to be a brilliant coach. He was in the Championship last season. He's adapted to life in the Premier League, and fair play to him. And it's a fortress, isn't it? The Stadium of Light, yet to lose at home in the Premier League, and you flip that around with what Newcastle have done away from home, or rather what they've not done, and we saw it again in midweek. If that game was at St James's Park, I'd have put good money on them to see it out against Leverkusen, but they've just got this Achilles heel when it comes to playing away from home. It's a quick turnaround after flying back from Germany. So I think Sunderland will see this as a huge opportunity. They're going to do what they did against Arsenal. They're going to use that atmosphere from the crowd, which will be electric. They're going to get in their faces. They're going to be direct. I think this could be a difficult afternoon for Newcastle.
Yeah, it could be. And I was in Leverkusen, as we'd already mentioned, and I was speaking to some of the Northeast reporters, and a lot of the sort of feeling was, Newcastle can embrace the chaos when they're at home because the crowd help roar you on. But when you're away from home, the opposite is true, isn't it? You sort of almost sometimes feel as if you're wilting underneath that pressure of the home crowd. But what they do have now is they have Johan Visser back, and he is available for selection. He has got back ever so slowly from his knee injury. They've taken great care with him. They wouldn't put him in the side or even get him anywhere near the first team Scott until they thought that there was only a very, very minute chance of him being re-injured. They've been very protective of him. And Eddie's quite patient with new signings anyway and integrating people into the team. But he does give them a different option. Voltemada, very good at holding the ball up, keeping possession, finding a pass, obviously coming up with finishes. But sometimes you need that threat in behind, that pace, and he is a different option for them.
He is, and you're right about Eddie. Even when he first came in, he improved the players that are already there to get them away from the relegation zone, and then he waited on players like Bruno Guimaraes to actually properly put them in. Yeah, he absolutely gives him the other option. Voltemada, brilliant. We love him. 70s detective series. The way he drops off, the way how tall he is, how he can hold the ball up. But they have lost that threat in behind. My worry is, like a lot of players when they're out for a long time, Rodri being the perfect example, is that how many minutes do you give them? Because you want to try and get them as far as possible to get 100% fit. However, that's not going to be the case. And you're going to have to be very, very careful with that. So, yes, he's a brilliant addition. Yes, finally you can get him back on the pitch. But I still don't think he'll play anywhere near like a 90 minutes to try and really, really affect this game.
Okay, well, we'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the course of Sunday, 1:30, Game Day Live with myself, Dean Ashton, Mickey Gray, Perry Groves, and the Crookmeister. We'll all be at different games across the country with the Scottish League Cup final going on as well. 4 games in the Premier League, plus WL action too. It's going to be one hell of a bumper Sunday. Look forward to that. That's 1:30 this Sunday. Before that, Adrian takes you round the grounds on Game Day Live on talkSPORT, 1 o'clock on Saturday. Scott's going to be involved in that programme. Chelsea, Everton, Liverpool, Brighton, plus a full classified service at 5:15. And then we'll bring you live commentary of Arsenal against Wolverhampton Wanderers, live and only on talkSPORT. There is Monday Night Football this week as well, so whatever you do, make sure you remember that, because the last time that Man United played on a Monday night, they had a fantastic 4-1 victory. What are they going to come up with against Bournemouth? What are you laughing for? We're doing
because
this
Monday is the
great.
talkSPORT Christmas party, as you know, so it might be a similar story.
So you're not going to watch that game either. Funnily enough, a bit like last week when you were out on the lash while Man United were playing, I was doing a game. I will be at Old Trafford doing the game whilst you're out on the lash at the talkSPORT Christmas party. Have a good time. Enjoy it. That's it from Premier League All Access. We're back on Monday to review all of the weekend's Premier League action.